Hi, I'm Laura Bocquin. I work for the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts in the Education Department. And part of what I do is I like to share art with the community and just help everybody stay creatively engaged. We have a program that we call Learning Through Art, and typically it's an in-school program, but with the changing times that we have right now and everybody having to be home, we are trying to continue to reach the community and teach students and keep them engaged with art virtually. So what we are going to be doing today is discussing a project that I normally do with 5th grade students. It is based on the Fibonacci spiral, or the golden spiral, and we'll get into that in a minute. But it's sort of based on, or is used in this gorgeous tile wall behind me. So we are going to talk about that and how we can find a relationship between math and art, and how they are interconnected, and how you can still have fun even when you're using math. All right? All right, so we are going to work with the materials you see here today once we get started with our project. Things that you would need: we've got a paper that has a very specific graph on it, and we'll get to that in just a minute. This is an example of the kind of project we're going to do. We're going to use a mathematical compass, a regular pencil and eraser, a black Sharpie, some colorful materials. I like to use color pencils. You can use markers, crayons, maybe watercolor paint, even whatever you have. Some collaging papers, which basically can just be anything from construction paper to magazines, or even like newspaper cutouts, just some fun, different kind of papers. We use a color wheel to discuss color theory, and then a glue stick and some scissors. Scissors aren't also necessary because you can always just tear paper, but if you have them, that's great. If you would like to use materials the museum provides, we do have that available. You would just contact us at pr@mmfa.org. That's an email. And basically, I could get together these materials for you for a class of, or a group of students, of however many you have, really. You just let me know you want to do the Fibonacci project, and that way we can get you this paper that's got the graph on it, compasses, whatever you would need to complete the project. All right? Okay, so as I said earlier, we are going to be doing a project today that combines art and math, based on the discoveries, the studies of someone named Leonardo of Pisa. You may have heard of him before, or at the very least, you've probably heard of the Leaning Tower of Pisa in Italy. So he was from the same area as that. When I present the idea of a famous Leonardo to students, they always think I'm talking about Leonardo da Vinci. Also, yes, very famous, and did have a lot of amazing discoveries to share with the world, and inventions. But Leonardo of Pisa, who I'm going to be referring to as Fibonacci, this is his portrait right here. It's a picture of him. And he was a mathematician in the medieval times. So many centuries, hundreds of years before Leonardo da Vinci. And he is famous for discovering something that we refer to as the Fibonacci sequence of numbers, or numerical sequence. And what we're going to talk about today is how we can use that sequence of numbers to create basically a perfectly proportioned spiral. And behind me on this wall, you'll see the spiral kind of mapped out. And that's what we're going to be using today for our own inspiration. So before we get to the fun part, we're going to talk about how we can use that sequence and what that sequence is. All right, so we were talking about Leonardo of Pisa, but I said I was going to be referring to him as Fibonacci. And you might be wondering why. So in Italian, kind of like how in English we have Johnson or Jackson for maybe like last names, because a long time ago it became that they were the son of Jack or the son of John. And so in Italian, this is the idea of his father's name was Bonacci, and so he was of Bonacci, and so he's Fibonacci. It's like a nickname. okay? And so in a lot of his publishings, he's referred to as Fibonacci. So that's just what has taken on for how we refer to him. So Fibonacci spiral is this perfectly proportioned spiral we talked about, based on a sequence of numbers. Now, when I'm teaching this to students in person, I stop here and I say, okay, what do you think the next number is going to be? It's kind of maybe hard to tell at this point, so I'll give you one more to see if you can figure it out. The idea being, what's the pattern to this numerical sequence, all right? When we think of patterns, we normally think of art, and we will be using patterns in art today too. But right now we're talking about a number pattern. So the idea is there's a very specific pattern to this numerical sequence to get the following numbers, all right? And what that is that you add the two previous numbers to get the next numbers, right? So 0 plus 1 is 1, 1 plus 1 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, 3 plus 5 is 8, 5 plus 8 is 13, and you could just go on and continue, and you could just get big, huge numbers. But the point is that they stay proportionally relative, okay? So no matter how big the numbers get, you've still achieved them. The sequence is still the same. The pattern is still the same, okay? And so what we're going to be doing in just a minute is we are going to use this concept of this numerical sequence to create this perfectly proportioned, I keep saying that, spiral. And the idea is that it spirals out in a way that is pleasing to our eyes, okay? So it's aesthetically pleasing. And that just means we like the way it looks, okay? So that's what we're going to do next, is some art. All right, so we have our project ready to go. I've got an example up here. You can kind of already see the idea of the spiral going through on this graph paper in the completed project. And I want you to notice before we start, another thing that we talk about with this perfect spiral is that it's found in nature. You see this perfect spiraling out, like in seashells. If you look at the center of sunflowers, the way the seeds are in the middle of the flower. If you look at a pine cone, or if you think of a DNA molecule, if you've seen the way the spiral is, all of these are great examples in nature of this perfect proportion that is aesthetically pleasing, okay? And so what we're going to create on this special graph paper is the same idea of a perfectly proportioned spiral. I'm going to explain what that means now. So you'll notice on my graph paper, it's made up of a whole bunch of squares that are filling up one big rectangle, okay? This rectangle is a golden rectangle, just like I referred to this spiral as the golden spiral. And again, just being the idea of it being very pleasing to our eyes. And so what it is that makes it pleasing is the proportion. And if you look here at each of these, where you see the bold lines, these are all breaking down the Fibonacci sequence, or the numerical sequence. So we've got one square that's bold, one square that's bold. And then this right here is a slightly bigger square, but it's made up of 4 squares, but so 2 on each side, just like 2 is the next number. The one down here is made up of 3 on each side. See, as how 3 is our next number. Then we go to a 5 by 5 square, then we go to an 8 by 8 square, and 13 by 13, just following our sequence. And as we make our spiral, each new turn of the spiral goes into a new section of a larger golden rectangle. So it's staying within this perfect proportion, this aesthetically pleasing proportion. So we've got one here, one here, one here, one here, and then the whole thing together. All right, what we're going to be using first is a mathematical compass. And like I said, if you don't have access to this, which not everybody does, I do not have one of these at home, the museum would love to let you check out these materials and borrow them so that you can do this at home. So the way a mathematical compass works is they're really handy, they're a lot of fun, but they create perfect circles without you having to like try to sketch it, okay? Or in this case, it's going to be the perfect curve. So I'm going to make it the right size that I need. Really for the small squares, we're going to start small, right? So 1 is our first number here. I'm going to use just a pencil, all right? So I'm going to use a regular pencil because it's a little silly for me to try to use the compass in there. And all we're going to do, here, let me show you with this. So these two squares, so these two single squares on top of each other, kind of like this. All right, just a bigger version of that. We're going to create kind of like a really wide C in there. So it's going to come down from the bottom right corner, curve up to the top left, and then keep going in the next one from the bottom left corner and curve up to the top right corner. All right, so I'm going to do that right here. And as I go, I'm going to go ahead and outline mine with a Sharpie. And that's just so you can see really well what I'm doing. When you're doing this at home, you would want to save the Sharpie for last, just in case you want to erase any of your pencil marks or make any adjustments. All right, so that's the beginning of our spiral. The smallest little inner part on the two single squares that are on top of each other, okay? So the next square, just like we look at our sequence, is going to be the 2 by 2 square. So 2 is our next number, and each side of this square has 2 squares making it up. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pick up where we left off here, the point of the compass, and then there's the lead, like a pencil of the compass. The point is going to go in the bottom left corner of the 2 by 2 square, and the lead goes in the top left corner of that same 2 by 2 square. And you just keep the point in place and swing down the lead. And again, I'm going to go ahead and outline it with a Sharpie so you can see it better. Pencil's kind of hard to see when you're not right next to it. All right? And so from there, if we're following our sequence, we're going to go next to the square that's got 3 squares making up each side, so the 3 by 3 square. So again, to pick up where we left off, I'm going to have the lead of my compass touching the top right corner of that 3 by 3 square, and the point touching the top left corner. Did I say that right? The top right corner, it's confusing when you're saying left and right so many times. The top right corner is where the lead of the compass will go, and the top left corner is where the point is going to go. And this time you're just going to swing it down to that bottom left corner. And the point, again, or the important part, is for the point to stay in place when you're using the compass, okay? Let me go ahead and outline that with the Sharpie. All right. So as we go, remember it keeps getting bigger, right? Because we're adding more squares because our numbers are getting bigger. And so you have to remember that you have to make your compass a little wider, and you've got to line it up just right. So for the next square, which is our 5 by 5 square, it has 5 squares making up each side of it. The point of the compass is going to go in the top right corner, and the lead of the compass is going to go in the bottom right corner. It's picking up again where we left off with the last part of the spiral. All right, and then I'm just going to swing it up. Okay, outline that with the Sharpie. It got a little crooked. but that's okay. All right, if we just did the 5 by 5, we're going to go on to the 8 by 8 square. So that's got, each side of the square has 8 squares, 8 tiny squares, making it up. So I'm going to do the point on the bottom right corner, and I'm going to make this a lot wider. And the lead will go all the way over to the left corner, the left bottom corner of the 8 by 8 square. And then swing it up. All right, outline it with the Sharpie. And then I'll tell you, and this always puts a little fear in my students when I tell them this, the compass doesn't get as big as the 13 by 13 square. So we just have to wing it. But that's okay, because you can do that. Because yes, we're talking about a perfectly proportioned spiral, but that doesn't mean that we have to get it right on the first try, okay? So just relax, and we're going to try to do it swiftly. This is a good art tip to learn. If you try to sketch something out, it's going to be kind of rough and jagged. It's never going to be as smooth or as clean as you want it to be. So the best thing to do is to just trust yourself and to do it, if you can, in one swoop. And we're going to go from the top left corner, curve down to the bottom right corner. So that's the biggest thing you want to remember. You don't want it to be straight diagonal. That's not what we're looking for. We want it to have a curve to it coming down to this corner. And if it goes too far this way, guess what? That's okay. Working in pencil, we can erase it. No big deal. So let's try it out. I'm going to cut mine in a little bit too far, too fast. But let me see. Let me adjust it. That's better. I like that more. Okay, so now I have a kind of a split line happening here, but I'm not going to erase it yet. I'm going to use my Sharpie, and I'm going to outline the one that I want to keep and then erase the one that I don't want. That's another good tip, okay? Because once you get the eraser out, you might accidentally also erase what you wanted to keep. So I'm going to outline slowly. Oop. There we go. All right, I'm happy with that. Then I'll erase this pencil mark that I don't want. There. Okay, so we have the math part done, the pattern relationship within these squares, okay? Quick quiz, if you're watching this at home, okay, remember, what is the pattern to the Fibonacci sequence, or to the numerical sequence that creates the golden spiral? Okay, remember what it is that you take the two previous numbers, you add them together to get the next number. So every new number comes from adding the two numbers that came before it, okay? All right, here's where we get to have a little bit more art fun. Are you ready? Okay. All right, so before we get into using color on our spirals that we have now graphed out, I wanted to go back to this tile wall that we have here at the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts. And this was a community project. So each one of these tiles that you see was created by a different person from the community. And it was led by a former curator of education here, Tara Katie Sartorius. And the idea, like I said, and we've just discussed mathematical patterns and numerical sequences. But this is now where we're making our connection from that math world to the art world, okay? And we're going to talk about color theory and how patterns are used in art as well, okay? So if you look at this, just take a look at the different colors you see and consider how the colors are used on this tile wall, what their relationship is to each other, and how they're placed within the spiral. And while you're looking, think about how we used pattern to create the spiral. So if you look here, you'll notice that they're grouped kind of together, right? So you've got reds over here, blues, greens. This is kind of pinkish purples, more greens down here, browns over there, some other neutral colors. But you'll notice that they follow the spiral. Okay, so this particular group art project is using the golden spiral to continue creating more aesthetic beauty for us to look at. Okay, so we're using that spiral as a guideline for how the colors are positioned on the graph. So if we look at each one of these tiles as one of those small squares on the graph paper, that's what we're going to be doing when we create our own project. We're going to take each square and add color in a way that is utilizing patterns, but also that is pleasing to our eyes. All right, that's what we're going to do next. All right, so now we've got our blank graph paper with just the bold spiral on it. I've got my example up here that I talked about earlier, and I've just referenced the tile wall here at the museum. And I talked about how we've used now a mathematical pattern, and we're going to now try to incorporate color patterns into our art project. And if you look at this example up here, you can kind of follow in this part of the spiral. The artist who created this used the idea of how colors mix to create new colors, or almost kind of like how, if you think of a rainbow, how that would look. So purple's here, then it goes to blue, it kind of transitions into a greenish blue, or a blue-green, and then a true green into yellows, orange, red, and then going into pinks, back to purple and blue, okay? So that gets back into color theory and the color wheel. So the three primary colors are yellow, red, and blue. And they're called primary because they're the main colors. And what that means is they make all of the other colors, okay? They're very important. But I can't take other colors and mix them to make yellow, red, or blue, okay? These are just naturally occurring, the primary colors. When you mix two primary colors, you get what we call a secondary color. So yellow and red mix to make orange, yellow and blue mix to make green, and red and blue mix to make purple or violet. In between those, you can take it a little further, and you get tertiary colors. So basically, a little bit more red into your purple makes a red purple or a red violet, or a little bit more blue would make a blue violet. A little bit more blue into your green will make a blue green. A little more yellow into your green will make a yellow green. A little more yellow into your orange makes a yellow orange, or a little bit more red into your orange makes a red orange. And the reason why the color wheel is so important is because it's basically a tool for artists or those wanting to learn more about art to help us guide how we use colors, again, in a way that makes our eyes and our brain kind of work together. So certain colors look good together because of the science behind the color wheel. So like we mixed red and blue to get violet or purple, and across from that on the color wheel is yellow. When you put those two colors next to each other, because yellow is not in red, or excuse me, not in purple, they kind of pop visually. It looks really good next to each other. So those are called complementary colors. They complement each other. Same with red and green, same with blue and orange. And so I would challenge you, when you are working on your color patterns on this at home, to try to incorporate some, either one complementary color pair or all of them if you want. And you can also do what we call warm colors in one area. So kind of like if you look up here, we've got in this section that yellow, orange to red. Those are colors that make you think of things that are hot, so like fire or the sun. If you're going to paint the sun, you're almost always going to use yellow or orange, because you think of it, those as like bright and hot colors. We also have cool colors, so from green, blue to purple, and those are things that make you think of things that are cold. So like if you're going to color what you think of as like the ocean or a lake, you're probably going to use a blue or a blue-green. Or if you're drawing a picture that has a bunch of trees and you're doing shade in those trees, you're going to do kind of a bluish or a purple for the shade, because that's where it's darker, it's cool. Those are cool colors. All right, so I'm going to incorporate some of the idea of complementary colors and cool and warm colors on my spiral. But I don't want you to feel limited. You don't have to do exactly what I do. That is not the point of this project. This is one of my favorite projects, because where the spiral is so precise and you have to follow these mathematical guidelines, right? When it comes to the art part, you get to decide. You make the patterns you want, you use the colors you want, you decide what it looks like, okay? So I'm going to start with, I think I'll start with warm colors. And what I'm going to do while I'm working is I'm not just going to use colored pencils. I'm going to start with colored pencils to get an idea of what my patterns are going to be. But then I'm also going to incorporate some collage papers like I talked about earlier, okay? So I'm going to maybe pick some of these squares that I color in, and then maybe I'll either cover them with the same color kind of paper, or I'll use some collage paper to kind of enhance the design I've already started. So you'll notice I am not just getting wild with my colors, right? Okay, I'm not just coloring in this whole section of the spiral. That would start to lose our purpose. And if our purpose is that we are trying to create something that is following the guidelines of this spiral and this graph, right? Just like we talked about with the tile wall, I want to make sure, I have to talk and color at the same time. It's not that easy. You try doing it at home. I have to make sure that I'm going in each square to keep it neat and to keep it kind of orderly, along with my numerical sequence order. All right, let's see. I like the orange, but I think it could be a little bit brighter, so I'm going to add some yellow over the orange. Oh, that's fun. So now I'm making kind of a tertiary color like I talked about. It's more of a yellow orange than a true orange, because it has more yellow in it than red. Colored pencils are a lot of fun to play with. I'm going to strengthen my red up just a little bit. I think after this, I'm going to go to some cool colors, and I'm working here. And so I've got a little bit of everything on this line right here. I've got orange, red, a yellow, orange, and a yellow. But mostly it's closer to being with the orange. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my color wheel, and I'm going to think, okay, so what was the complementary color of orange? So that's the color that's across from it on the color wheel. It's blue, okay? Because again, orange is made of yellow and red. There's no blue in orange. And they're opposite each other on the color wheel. So when you put them next to each other, they look really good. So I'm going to use some blues here. Maybe I'll do all blue. Kind of mix it up. Find kind of a light blue. That's kind of a purple, but I like it. And that's kind of an aqua color, kind of a blue-green. All right. So I'm going to start with this one. Do the blue-green. Your pattern doesn't have to follow the rows and the columns of the squares. I'm doing that because sometimes I struggle thinking outside of the box. It's just what I'm doing. If you want to make a circle through the squares, or I've had students write their names with the squares before. That always looks really neat. Or if you want to draw something in the squares, so like say, see in here, this one has circles in the squares, or there's this pattern of kind of like X's throughout this one. You are welcome to create, again, whatever you want it to be, so that it's your own colorful pattern. What I think I'm going to do next is add some collage papers to it. And the fun thing you can do with the collage papers, you can take them and do square by square. You can also shape a little bit of it to the spiral. Now I would ask students in a class to not find a big sheet and just like cover up the whole space. Color it a little bit, right? Don't totally cheat. But if you want to use some and make it fit to part of your spiral, I would welcome that. So I'm going to use a good deep blue here, kind of like again, blue being the complementary of the orange, right? And I want it to fit in there, but I've got to figure out exactly where I want it to be. So I'm going to take my Sharpie and just kind of draw out where it would go in here. Okay, so it's just going to fall there. We cut that. See how that's going to look. Right there. That'll be interesting. And it's water, like the blue ocean. Okay. Gluing on the back of this. Whenever you're gluing something, you don't need to cover the whole back. You just want to do the edges all the way around. Whoop. Maybe a couple times. And then flip it and stick it. There we go. So here I've got the ocean, kind of reminiscent of this idea of a spiral seashell. I kind of like that. But I think what I might do in this one then is make something that's kind of connected to land. So I think maybe I'm going to draw some leaves. So I'm going to use my squares. And I'm creating a leaf in here. I'm going to green because I haven't really done much green yet. Okay. Then I'm also going to use that one behind it. It's too dark. It's not what I wanted. The other fun part of art is experimenting. So like I said earlier, green is made up from yellow and blue. So this is a little too dark, so I'm going to take a little yellow and try putting it on top of it to see if that helps. It does, if you hold the pencil the whole time. All right. That's nice. So I'll do yellow first and then do some green lightly on top of it, now that I know. All right, and so we said that green is made from yellow and blue, so now I'm going to take some blue and add it to the rest of that. And of course, I'm showing you this in one session. But when I do this project with students, we don't normally just sit down and do the whole thing at one time. The art part takes a while because there are so many little squares and there's so much thought that can be put into the kind of patterns you want to make or the kind of, or how you want to use the colors. So don't feel pressure to sit down and bang this out in like an hour because it would probably take you longer. Let it be, you know, a couple different times, maybe even 3 times that you come at it, maybe 30 minutes each, however you want to handle it. Don't worry about trying to produce something so quickly. That is kind of takes the fun out of art. When you're doing art, you want to be able to let yourself, if you're doing it, if you're the person making it, or if you're helping somebody do it, you want to be able to enjoy the art that you're making. Let yourself be able to express yourself. So what I'm doing is I'm going through and finding a bunch of yellows and greens to kind of finish out this idea that I've got here. Maybe some blues too. And I'm just going to have some fun gluing them on. I'm going to show you the idea of how you can go back and add some orange to where maybe you've already done it, or add a color on top of where you've done that color. These are not going to be perfect squares, but they will fit. Just a little fun. Paper on top of color. Something I haven't used here yet is the idea of value gradation. So that's basically when it's the same color, but it gradually changes from light to dark or dark to light. And so I'm going to play with that idea of color right now. So I'm going to make these a little lighter. And all I'm doing to create that is I'm just softening how much I'm touching the paper. So I'm just not pressing as hard with the pencil. And so it's getting just this nice little, almost like a dusting of color. And then here, following that spiral, I would make it a little bit darker. When you're doing something that's a gradation, you don't want it to be a big jump. It's supposed to be gradual. Those words are related. So this is what I was talking about earlier with the idea of doing patterns within the pattern. So instead of just coloring all the squares as they are, as squares, you can add designs within the squares, which makes it, again, even more visually interesting and appealing. So I'm doing a darker red circle in the middle, and then just doing a light red around it out there. That's fun. All right, moving here. We're getting somewhere. I think I want this one to be really colorful, kind of like how the artist who made this created this. Except I like these stripes. That's what I'm gonna do. So, let's play. Pink, green, yellow, and purple. So pink, in case you didn't know, is actually red. You just add a little white to red and it makes it lighter to make pink. And so depending on where you are on the color wheel with that range of red, opposite of it would still be a green. So pink and green are going to be complementary colors also. You're just looking at a lighter green. That would be its complement. So I'm playing with two different pairs of complementary colors for fun. Oh, I said I was going to do stripes, didn't I? I have like a natural circle thing. I just like it. I'm going to start with circles, apparently. And then I'll do some stripes too. All right. Pink stripes, purple circles. Sticking with the idea of complementary, I'm going to use the green with the pinks. All right, and then I'm going to use the yellow with the purple. I think on the inside. So you want to take a step back every so often and look at the whole thing together, which gives you an idea of what the big picture is, what it's looking like. It also kind of just helps you refresh and think. Okay, so I need more blue in here for sure, because obviously I didn't really intend it, but I have like a ground and a sky thing going on, so I'm just going to go with what I was doing without realizing it. And maybe I'll put some clouds up there. Sure, we'll make it like sky and clouds. The cool thing about clouds is that you can't really go wrong. You can make it any shape you want because they're changing all the time and they look lots of different ways. So it doesn't have to be this or that or any particular way. It's just whatever you want it to be. Clouds can be fluffy, they can be big, they can be small, they can be round. Whatever you want. All right, what I'm going to do for my cloud is I'm going to do some more collaging. I'll find some pretty blues and white and gray if I can. That'll be nice. I'm just going to kind of use them within that shape that I drew. That's really nice. So I just so happen to have a cutout that was somebody else's painting printed, and so it's got a really fun blend of colors on it. So let's see if I can make that fit anywhere. That'll be nice. Finish it up with some green squares. Leaf. Doing some squares inside some squares to kind of balance out my circles inside the squares over here and circles down here. Okay. So again, yours does not have to look just like mine. This was all from my own wild brain, just kind of as I was going, creating and having fun. But what I tried to do was in each section of the spiral, I tried to create a new different kind of pattern or use color in a different way. So, thank you so much for hanging out and doing this art with me. I hope that if you've done this at home that you had a really good time. If you have watched and now you're interested in doing this project, please, like I said, just reach out to the museum. Our website is mmfa.org, and an email that you can always contact is pr@mmfa.org. This was the Fibonacci project based on the Fibonacci numerical sequence, which is I've apparently erased as I've been working. But again, the idea of each new number is achieved by adding the two numbers that were before it. That is the pattern to the numerical sequence. That's the Fibonacci sequence of numbers. All right, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.